Hi, my name is Barrington Miller. I'm the Director of Issuer Engagement at the Canadian Securities Exchange. And today we have a unique special podcast because we're talking about PDAC and mining and mineral exploration. And of course, leading up to it, because this is coming out a few weeks before the big dance and the big show. And today I am joined with Darcy Krohman and Mark Faulkner from the Canadian Securities Exchange. Of course, Darcy is a listings manager, not the listings manager, at the CSE, as well as our in-house geologist. And Mark Faulkner is the Senior VP of Listings and Regulation. Welcome to the podcast. Now, we're going to get right into this. And normally we do an event, and we're doing one this year called PDAC, but we wanted to satisfy the demand for our virtual content. And so we're going to interview a couple of key CSE members to talk about the things that are not going on at the Canadian Securities Exchange when it comes to mineral exploration and mining, as well as policy and regulation. So sit back, relax, and we will be right back after this brief clip. And we're back. And let's get to know our interviewees a little bit. Mark, can you tell us sort of how you got here, what road you took, and what it is exactly the Senior VP of Listings and Regulations does at the CSE?
My background was with the Toronto Stock Exchange and the early iteration of IROC, which was Market Regulation Services, when it spun out of the TSX way back in the beginning of the century. Following that, I came from, so about 14 years with the TSX and IROC or RS, and then I came to what was then CNQ, Canadian Trading and Quotation System. And the CNQ had just been recognized as a trading and quotation system. And so that was spring of 2003. And I came over to start helping with getting in the listings or the quotations, but getting the companies that we were going to trade. So this, the company was in its infancy. We had less than 10 employees, and we were really struggling to get everything ready, get everything going. We did finally launch in July of 2003. And less than a year later, in May of 2004, we got recognized by the Ontario Securities Commission as an exchange. So since then, it's been nothing but growth. And so I started with just the listings and some involvement with the trading rules. And that's basically what I've done since then, as whether it was a manager, director, vice president, senior vice president, it's all been related to the regulation and the approval, the application of the listed companies, and the policy development for the listing policies.
Thanks for that, Mark. And we'll move on to Darcy. Darcy, you've recently joined us at the CSE, and arguably you have deepened the bench in many different ways, just based on your past experience. I was just wondering if you could go into that a little bit on how you got here.
Yeah, I've been here for about a year and a half now, but originally I finished my undergrad from UBC in 1985 and spent about 4 years largely up working on North Stewart in the Iskay, during the Iskay Creek days, and completed a lot of business courses during my undergrad. Decided to continue on, started an MBA at McGill. It was just fun. It was somewhat redundant to a lot of the courses I had taken. Switched to a CA program, articled with KPMG, and finished that in the early 90s. I've worn a number of hats in the industry. Was a mining analyst for a number of years with an investment bank. I was ended up seconded by the BC Securities Commission post-BREX to help draft new legislation, which ultimately became National Instrument 43101. Like it or not, has become something of a template for securities related disclosure for mineral projects in the world. And so a good portion of my career over the last 20 years has been related to this. I spent about 10 years at the Securities Commission before leaving and becoming a CFO for mineral projects in South America, Mexico, the South Pacific, and Fiji, developing projects there. IROC for a number of years, reviewing news releases related to mineral project disclosure. And had an opportunity about a year and a half ago from Mark, and it's worked out well since then.
Well, we're more than happy to have you, and like I said, our roster has been bolstered. And for our audience, just to give you an idea, when Mark said we started out with around 10 people, I think across the nation we are now mid 60s, maybe touching 70 employees. So so we've not only grown as a stock exchange with our listings, but as well as with our staff. So let's talk about listings. And I got a company, and I got a mineral exploration company, and I want to list on the CSE. And we've recently revised our policies. And I guess when people say that, you automatically think, oh, there has to be tons of changes, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But in speaking with Mark and Darcy off camera, it's not necessarily about what we did do, but more of what we didn't do. Mark, I was just wondering if you could perhaps begin to touch on that.
This is the project that we've had over the last few years to rewrite the policies has been the largest policy project that we've undertaken since we launched. And it's a comprehensive rewrite of the policies. So there are a lot of changes. There are a lot of new requirements. There are things that we didn't do for a long time that we have added in, but a lot of it is clarification, because our principle has always been that we have disclosure principles in securities law, requirements and principles in law, and we've relied on those. We have sort of what we'd refer to as a reliance model, where we just follow all the existing securities law, and we don't duplicate the rules or add additional rules where they're not specifically necessary at the exchange level. But many of those we found left questions for people. They would call looking for a specific requirement because another exchange had it and we didn't. And so we clarified some of those to bring them to the same standard, but also to make it a little more obvious. When looking at our rules, you'd be able to see what the requirement was, whether it was securities law, corporate law, or an exchange level policy, it would all be in one place. So a lot of the changes and additions are really to clarify certain things. What we haven't done is forgotten our roots. We know that it was mineral exploration that built the exchange, notwithstanding the huge surge in the medical and then recreational cannabis, and now some of the things that have followed on from there. It was mineral exploration that built the exchange from the beginning. And one of the things that we've always been there for is early stage projects. It's our objective to provide a listing venue for early stage mineral exploration projects and a way to finance them. And one of our objectives continues to be to provide the lowest or access to the lowest cost capital in Canada for those projects. So there are some issues. There are some concerns that have been raised, and there are some things that we need to be aware of as we continue to list early stage projects. But what we didn't do in this comprehensive policy rewrite is change the basic entry level requirements for mineral exploration companies. They are the same as they have been for the last 18 years. And we continue to look at different aspects of a listing, continue to look at the corporate structure, the capital structure, the experience and the history of the management and the board. So there is some subjectivity in there, but the basic thresholds for qualification are still the same as they've always been.
Thank you, Mark. And if you haven't checked it out, we have a magazine called the Canadian Securities Exchange Magazine. It had another name before, but we've changed it. And in our latest issue, which I think came out during VRIC, the Vancouver Resource International Conference, which was earlier this month, there was a fine article profiling Mr. Darcy. Now, one of the questions had to do with what is the most important thing companies should consider, especially mineral and mining exploration companies, should consider when going public. Darcy, I'm going to turn this over to you to sort of expand on that.
One fundamental element of not just mineral exploration companies, but any company is the management. And there's no shortage of strong mineral projects being impaired by incorrect management or the probably most incorrect management mix. Having the correct functions covered by management, recognizing the fact that as a skill set for a mineral exploration company is significantly different than developing that company to actually moving it through to production. At some point, management has to recognize that they have to pass that, or should pass that project on to another management group, or bring in the appropriate management with those skill sets. So that is the one fundamental element of any mineral exploration company.
Mark, we were again talking offline, and I think one of the focuses that you mentioned when it comes to management is that the CSE is going to take a look at management, maybe more in depth than last time. Just wondering if you could clarify that for our audience.
Sure. There's always been a requirement and discussion in the policies about the management and experience. And like Darcy says, it is a key component to a successful company. And when we say we're going to look at it, we still haven't set explicit standards. You know, somebody must have X number of years of this, or must have these specific credentials. But we have to look at these things as part of the whole picture. So really what we're trying to do is ensure that we're still there for early stage companies with a management team and a board and investors that are keen to push that project forward. Where we want to step in and maybe apply a little bit more discretion or a little bit more subjectivity to that review is when we get a company, for example, where nobody has any real experience in mineral exploration or any history, and they've put together a company quickly with an option on a property that may have even been used for another company to get listed previously. Those are the things we want to look at a little bit more closely, because there isn't as much of an indication there that this is going to be a mineral exploration company for very long. And that's what we're trying to really focus on a little bit more, to ensure that we're there for early stage companies, but not just to get a company listed.
FAQ time, frequently asked questions. This comes up often with myself and my colleagues, Anil Mall and Phil Shum and Anna Sarin and James Black. I have a project, it's in another country, and do I need someone in management who is Canadian or of Canadian citizenship or residency to be on the team? Do I need that on my board? We get these questions I'm going to say weekly. So coming from the listing and regulation department, what say you?
It's not an explicit requirement. Certainly not at the exchange level. But there's adequate guidance out there from the CSA about issuers operating in emerging markets. And it's not necessarily that every country outside of Canada is an emerging market. And somewhere the countries may be considered an emerging market, are not necessarily considered that for mineral exploration because they have well-established laws and infrastructure for exploration. And so we don't necessarily need to treat it as an emerging market. But the reason I raise that is because that guidance for emerging markets issuers is all about the proper disclosure and the best practices for operating in whatever jurisdiction a company is operating in. So for some, there's a higher risk on the financial side. Others, there's a higher risk on the environmental side. Wherever a company is operating, we have to make sure that the procedures they have and the governance practices they have are appropriate for that jurisdiction. And the reason I raise that here is because part of those is local knowledge, speaking the language, knowing the laws and the reporting requirements in Canada and in the jurisdiction they're operating in. So it's not necessarily that they be a Canadian resident or even resident in Canada at the time, but that they're the right person or they have the right people in place for operating where they are and reporting and following the laws in Canada.
But I was just going to add just to
please
get Mark's comments. The one element about disclosure of with respect to mineral projects in Canada is that the disclosure has to be signed off by that technical disclosure needs to be signed off by a qualified person, and so just through the legal definition of that. You have to be a professional engineer, professional geologist in Canada. Plus, there are other professional designations in foreign jurisdictions that are recognized, like being a fellow of the Oz IMM in Australia, or being licensed in any number of the U.S. states. Be a member of SAMREC in South Africa. So there is a bit of a linkage back to Canada and having those professional qualifications to hold yourself out as a qualified person in Canada when signing off on technical disclosure related to the securities industry. So yeah, just wanted to kind of add that element as far as from that international perspective of drawing it into the requirements under Canadian legislation. So
that's an excellent point. Thank you, Darcy and Mark. That was a great response. Darcy, this is going to be taken right out of the magazine. From your perspective, what are some of the challenges that public mining companies are currently facing in today's environment?
The number of issues facing mining companies are significant, and it's becoming harder and harder to develop a mineral project anywhere in the world, where it used to be lag times in some jurisdictions for 5 years to 10 years. Now those jurisdictions are becoming 10, 20 plus years in some of these developing countries. So it'll certainly bring the time from exploration to actual production is becoming significantly longer. A good portion of that is recognizing the stakeholders, having to address the issues with respect to Indigenous people, and employment standards. So those certainly have issues, environmental issues, climate change. They have all impacted. The CSR issues have become paramount over the last 10 plus years, and are now embedded in securities legislation here in Canada. So in order to meet worldwide demand for metals, overcoming these hurdles is definitely going to be a challenge going forward. It's particularly in the Western world, I believe, where we are much more cognizant, I believe, of environmental standards. It seems as in certain countries, China is working significantly in jurisdictions in Africa where geopolitical risk is a lot higher, where it is becoming increasingly difficult for Canadian companies to operate. So it is definitely a challenge for what I believe certainly Western world and in particular Canadian mining companies to operate. In addition, the access to capital, risk capital is becoming increasingly difficult. There's more competition for blockchain, any number of competitors.
Mark, I don't know if you can add on to that, where some of the challenges that are facing either operational challenges or listing challenges, perhaps.
I think Darcy's covered a lot of the challenges in the industry. When we look at the listings challenges, I can't help but take this opportunity to say we're there to help companies overcome those listings challenges. So if that was a layup, thanks. But that's really part of it. And what I was talking about earlier, by not raising the bar, so to speak, or changing the thresholds, despite all these other challenges, by keeping the basic listing criteria the same, that's known. So when a company is looking at overcoming these other challenges to get to a listing, they already know what they have to do. And everything else will fall into place. Well, it won't fall into place, but they know the things that they have to work on to get into place. Once they get to us, that's not a hurdle anymore. That should be the easiest part of the process. And it's like cost. The cost of all these other challenges can be significant. And we've also kept the cost of an initial listing application, or the fees for an initial listing application, as low as we can. So that's still part of the equation. Simple thresholds to meet, simple listing qualifications, and low initial listing fees. So we've often seen that, and I don't want to slam any other profession, but the legal fees, the audit fees, all of those other things that add up to such a big part of the going public process. Then they come to the exchange, and we're the smallest part of that. We're the last and easiest hurdle to overcome, and the lowest cost part of the whole process. We recognize all those other challenges. We don't want to add to those challenges.
And we're going to be winding down to near the end of the podcast, but I have a couple other questions. What are some of the misconceptions about mining that you think people should know? And Darcy, I'll tee this up for you.
Yeah, I believe that the impact on the environment, there's going to be some significant misconceptions surrounding that with respect to the mining industry. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of Canadian industry and a lot of the CSR issues which we've had to embed in our companies. If we can promote these responsibilities in the developing world, the extraction of metals can be done a lot more efficiently, effectively, with minimal input. There's always going to be some impact, but establishing the engineering practices, we've had these in our own backyard. Mount Poly tailings dam failure is prime example, and but we learn from past mistakes, and hopefully that we can promote responsible development of metals worldwide. For us to continue with our level of developing our standard of living, it's going to be a requirement that we extract these metals, and so hopefully it can be done responsibly.
Mark, and any misconceptions about mining or about the listing and regulation process?
Well, when we look at the process, or about taking the companies public, or more specifically coming to the CSE, I don't think there's any misconceptions. Maybe there's a perception that only junior projects would qualify or would list on the CSE, and that's not really the case. We have producers listed, and as I've emphasized during this podcast that we're still here for early stage companies. We're certainly there for any stage company. Part of the new policies have been to introduce a new tier of more senior companies or operating companies that are a little bit larger, even if they haven't been around as long. But the idea there is the exchange is here for all sizes of companies at all stages. It's an exchange for public companies, operating companies, early stage companies, and it works the same way in the mineral exploration space. Whether it's exploration or whether it's production, there's a space here for them. So the perception maybe that we're only here for the early stage companies, and maybe part of that's our tagline is the exchange for entrepreneurs, but they don't have to leave once they get to a certain stage. We're still here to provide low-cost capital or access to low-cost capital for those companies as they grow to that stage.
Oh, that's a really, really good point, and a good reminder. And an entrepreneur isn't someone who is just starting out. You can be doing whatever it is you've been doing for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. You're still an entrepreneur, and it's a good thing. So thank you for that clarification. Now, big picture, big landscape. What do you think the mining and mineral exploration sector is going to look like, or where is it headed? Either the rest of this year, the next few years, as it ties into the CSE. I guess you're looking in your crystal ball, reading the tea leaves, all of those things, or just using your knowledge and experience. What do you see taking shape?
Mark had a very valid point with respect to larger issuers being retained on the CSE. So we've been in uncharted territory the last few years with COVID, and have really seen the industry really pull in from international projects to more domestic projects. As we exit COVID, many more projects are going to be of the international flavor. Just personally, I haven't really worked in Canada from a technical perspective in close to 30 years. Most projects are Latin America, the South Pacific, a lot more of the developing nations. I suspect a lot more of our projects and the companies that are going to be seeking listings will have international assets. What that is going to involve is the fact that I think the capital raising is going to be require significantly more capital. It's for our minimum listing requirements of $75,000 is adequate for projects in Canada to a large degree. However, when you go to foreign jurisdictions, the price of entry is going to be significantly higher. So I suspect the projects are going to have a lot more of an international flavor. Obviously, there's been a movement towards the EV metals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and not that the precious metals, particularly gold, silver, and to a lesser degree the base metals, copper, will be diminished. But I certainly do see a significantly higher concentration of the EV metals. It's inevitable, and I suspect the CSE certainly has a good platform for attracting those projects.
Thank you, Darcy. And Mark, what's your take on the landscape?
Well, I think a couple of things Darcy mentioned are the things that are even without being really specific or without the experience and technical expertise, the shift in retail trading over the last several years has really had a huge impact on trading activity and investment, because the money's going to go to the active stocks, to the active companies, to the things that people are familiar with. And what's driving a lot of the retail activity is what they see every day, and what those new generation of retail investors is interested in. And so Darcy's last points about the battery metals and EVs and that kind of thing, that's really attracting a lot of attention now. And that means that once those companies are listed, or the companies with those projects are listed, they're going to be able to attract that capital that they need, because they're going to have that liquidity and the share prices to support it. So I think, and we're seeing more changes on the horizon with zero commission trading and more people getting more direct access to trading. So that's really going to drive a lot of the investment activity and a lot of the capital raises for some of these companies. And so, as Darcy says, it's going to expand. It's going to change the landscape for who gets to raise the capital, or who can raise the capital most easily. So I think all of the exchanges, all of the dealers, and especially the regulators are going to have to be prepared to keep an eye on how this retail landscape continues to evolve.
Excellent points. Gentlemen, on behalf of our company, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to educate us, to let us know what is happening at the CSE, as well as what's happening in the mining and mineral exploration space. For our audience, if you like this content, please join us at www.thecse.com. As well, you can find us on CSE TV, on YouTube, as well as the other socials such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I've been your host, Barrington Miller, and today I was joined by Darcy Krohman and Mark Faulkner from the Canadian Securities Exchange, talking about all things policy, regulation, and of course, mining. Join us for the next episode, where we will hopefully talk about more things mining. See you later at PDAC.